Let's begin by addressing the most dangerous misunderstanding in this entire conversation, because if you get this wrong, everything else collapses. And that is the belief that physical access equals emotional ownership. It doesn't. Just because a woman allows you to touch her in a certain way at a certain moment does not mean she belongs to you, is committed to you, or has made any deeper decision about you. What it means, very simply, very clearly, is that in that moment, she feels comfortable. And comfort is not the same as commitment. This distinction is where most men either develop real awareness or completely lose it because the mind, especially when driven by ego, wants to jump to conclusions. It wants certainty. It wants to take a signal and turn it into a story. She let me do this, so it must mean that. But human behavior doesn't operate in fixed meanings like that. It's fluid, contextual, emotional. Touch is a reflection of a state, not a declaration of ownership. When someone allows physical closeness, what you're actually seeing is a lowering of boundaries. And boundaries don't drop randomly. They drop when a person feels safe, when they feel at ease, when there's enough trust in the moment to allow that level of interaction. But here's the key, it's moment-based. That comfort exists within a specific context. The environment, the energy, the conversation, the emotional state. Change those variables and the behavior can change too. That's why assuming permanence from a temporary signal is such a critical mistake. Because the moment you shift from awareness to entitlement, everything changes. Entitlement introduces pressure. It changes how you behave, how you speak, how you carry yourself. Instead of being present, you start projecting expectations, and people feel that instantly. What was once a relaxed, natural interaction becomes something heavier, something more demanding. And that's when attraction begins to fade, because attraction thrives in freedom, not control. Now, let's go deeper. When a woman allows touch, she's not just reacting to you, she's reacting to how she feels around you. That's a combination of your presence, your energy, your awareness, and the emotional safety you create. It's not about a single action. It's about the environment you've built. So if you misinterpret that signal as ownership, you stop focusing on the environment and start focusing on the outcome. You move from connection to control, and control breaks the very dynamic that created the comfort in the first place. This is why understanding psychology matters more than memorizing behavior, because behavior without understanding leads to misinterpretation. Now, there's also a deeper philosophical layer here. When you see touch as a signal of comfort rather than possession, your entire mindset shifts. You stop trying to get something from the interaction and you start appreciating what's actually happening. You become more present, more grounded, more aware, and ironically, that makes you more attractive because you're no longer acting from need, you're acting from understanding. You respect the moment for what it is without trying to turn it into something more than it naturally is. And that respect creates trust. It shows that you're not just reacting impulsively, but responding with awareness. And awareness is rare. Most people don't operate from that place. They react, they assume, they rush. But when you stay calm, when you recognize a signal without overvaluing it, you create a different kind of interaction. One that feels safe, natural, and unforced. And that's the kind of interaction that actually grows. So as you move forward, remember this, touch is not a claim. It's not a guarantee. It's not a shortcut to certainty. It's simply a reflection of how someone feels in your presence in that moment. Treat it with awareness, not assumption. Because the moment you try to own what was only given freely, you lose the very thing you were trying to secure. And if you understand that deeply, you won't just avoid mistakes, you start building real connection. Now, once you understand that touch reflects comfort, not ownership, the next layer becomes critical because this is where most misinterpretation happens. And that is context, because the same exact action can carry completely different meanings depending on the situation in which it occurs. A touch by itself is neutral. It doesn't come with a fixed definition. It only gains meaning when you place it inside a broader picture, the environment, the relationship, the emotional tone, and the pattern of behavior surrounding it. Without that context, you're not reading reality, you're guessing. And guessing leads to mistakes. Think about it this way. A light touch on the arm in a loud social setting, where people are naturally more expressive, doesn't carry the same weight as that same touch in a quieter, more intimate moment. In one case, it could be part of general social energy. In another, it might signal a deeper level of comfort and focus. The behavior is identical, the meaning is not. This is why you can't isolate a single action and build a conclusion around it. You have to zoom out, You have to ask what else is happening here? What's the tone of the interaction? Is there sustained attention? Is there emotional engagement? Is there consistency in how she behaves toward you compared to others? Because context connects the dots. Without it, you're looking at fragments. With it, you begin to see patterns. Now let's go deeper into the psychological side of this. Human behavior is adaptive. People adjust how they express themselves based on where they are, who they're with, and how they feel in that moment. So a woman might be naturally more open, more expressive, more physically comfortable in one environment than another, not because of you specifically, but because of the setting. If you ignore that, you risk misattributing her behavior. You start believing that something is personal when it may simply be situational. And that's where overconfidence or confusion begins. But when you factor in context, everything becomes clearer. You start to notice differences, not just behaviors. Does she interact with you differently than she does with others? Is the touch accompanied by focused attention, by engagement, by signs of emotional investment? Or is it scattered, casual, and evenly distributed across everyone around her? These distinctions matter. Because attraction is selective, it doesn't spread evenly across every interaction. It narrows focus, it deepens engagement, it creates a pattern that stands out from the background. Context helps you see that contrast. Now, here's another important layer: timing within context. Not just where you are, but when something happens. A touch that occurs early, before any real connection is built, often means something different than a touch that emerges after sustained interaction, after rapport, after comfort has had time to develop. Timing reveals progression. And progression is one of the clearest indicators of genuine interest, because real attraction tends to build. It doesn't jump randomly without foundation. So when touch appears as part of that progression, it carries more weight. It reflects something that has been developing, not something that just happened. But again, this requires patience. You have to resist the urge to define the moment too quickly, to label it, to assign meaning before enough information is there. Because the moment you rush interpretation, you disconnect from reality and step into assumption. And assumption is where most mistakes happen. Instead, stay grounded. Observe. Let the context unfold. Let multiple signals align before you draw conclusions. Because when you do that, your understanding becomes more accurate, more stable, more real. You're no longer reacting, you're reading. And when you read correctly, your responses naturally improve. You don't overstep. You don't hesitate unnecessarily. You move in alignment with what's actually happening rather than what you think might be happening. That alignment is what creates smooth, natural interactions. So as you move forward, remember this: no action has meaning on its own. Meaning is created by context, by the environment, the pattern, the progression, and the emotional tone surrounding it. Train yourself to see the whole picture, not just the highlight. Because in the end, those who misunderstand behavior focus on isolated moments, but Hoes who truly understand it read the situation. And when you learn to read the situation, you stop guessing and start seeing things exactly as they are. Now, once you understand context, the next layer becomes even more revealing, because attraction is not just about isolated signals, it's about progression. Real interest doesn't appear fully formed, it develops. It moves step by step, often subtly, often without being announced. And if you learn to recognize that progression, you stop misreading moments and start understanding direction. Because direction is everything. Most people look at attraction as a yes or no question. Is she interested or not? But human psychology doesn't operate in binary like that. It operates in phases. There's an initial curiosity, a growing comfort, a deeper engagement, and only then, if everything aligns, a willingness to move into more personal territory. Touch follows that same path. It rarely begins with anything significant. It starts small, almost unnoticeable, socially acceptable, easy to dismiss. A brief touch during conversation, a light contact while laughing, something that doesn't feel like a big deal. And that's exactly the point. Early stage attraction doesn't announce itself loudly. It tests the waters. It asks, is this safe? Is this comfortable? Is this reciprocated? And based on the answers to those questions, it either progresses or it stops. This is where awareness becomes critical. Because if you recognize that early stage for what it is, not a conclusion, but a starting point, you begin to see the bigger picture. You stop asking, what does this mean right now? And start asking, where is this going? And when there's genuine interest, it goes somewhere. Over time, if comfort continues to build, those small casual touches don't just repeat, they evolve. They become more natural, less hesitant, slightly more persona. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. That gradual shift is what signals growing trust. Because trust is what allows boundaries to move, and boundaries don't move randomly. They move when someone feels increasingly safe, increasingly connected, increasingly certain that the interaction is positive. So when you see that progression, when touch becomes more consistent, more relaxed, more integrated into the interaction, you're no longer looking at a single moment. You're observing development, and development is far more reliable than any isolated signal. Now, here's where many men make a critical mistake. They try to accelerate the progression. They see an early signal and attempt to jump ahead, to skip steps, to move faster than the natural pace of the interaction. And when they do that, they disrupt the very process that was building in their favor. Because progression requires timing, it requires patience, it requires alignment with the other person's comfort level. You can't force trust. You can only create the conditions for it to grow. And when you respect that process, something powerful happens. The interaction begins to feel effortless. There's no tension, no confusion, no need to constantly question what's happening because the progression itself provides clarity. Each step builds on the last. Now, let's go deeper into the psychological side. Progression isn't just about behavior, it's about emotional investment. As someone becomes more comfortable physically, it usually reflects an increase in emotional openness as well. They're not just allowing more contact, they're allowing more connection. And connection is what sustains attraction over time. Without progression, attraction remains surface level. It stays stuck in moments that don't lead anywhere. But with progression, those moments begin to form a path, a direction, a sense that something is developing, not just happening. This is why patience is not passive, it's strategic. When you allow progression to unfold naturally, you gain more accurate information. You see whether interest is consistent, whether comfort is increasing, whether the connection is actually growing. And that clarity prevents mistakes. It keeps you grounded in reality instead of assumptions. So as you move forward, shift your mindset. Stop looking for instant answers and single actions. Start looking for movement over time. Start asking, is this evolving? Is this building? Because in the end, attraction is not proven in a moment. It's revealed in progression. And when you learn to recognize that progression, you stop trying to control the outcome and start understanding the process. And understanding the process is what gives you real confidence because you're no longer guessing, you're observing something that's actually unfolding in front of you. Now, once you understand progression, there's another layer that brings everything into sharper focus because attraction is never one-sided. It's not just about what one person allows or initiates, it's about what happens between both people. And that's where mutuality comes in. Mutuality is the difference between a moment and a connection. Because one-sided behavior can be misleading. A woman might allow touch. She might respond politely. She might even engage in a way that seems positive. But if that energy isn't flowing back and forth, if it's not being reciprocated naturally, then what you're seeing is not alignment. It's just participation is not the same as interest. Real attraction has a rhythm to it. It's interactive. It moves between two people without being forced. When there's mutuality, you don't feel like you're leading everything or interpreting everything. You feel like the interaction is happening with you, not just around you. You'll notice it in the way she responds, not just allowing contact, but initiating it at times, not just reacting to what you say, but adding to it, building on it, contributing her own energy into the exchange. There's a balance there, a flow, and that flow is incredibly important. Because when something is mutual, it becomes effortless. Not perfect, not always smooth, but natural. There's no constant need to question where you stand because the interaction itself provides feedback. It tells you through behavior that the connectio and is shared. Now let's go deeper into why this matters psychologically. Human beings are wired to invest where they feel a return. Emotionally, physically, mentally, we lean toward interactions where there's feedback, where our energy is met, where what we give is acknowledged and reflected back. So when a woman is genuinely interested, she doesn't just receive your presence, she engages with it. She participates in creating the dynamic. This is why mutual touch, for example, carries far more meaning than one-sided contact. If she initiates light physical contact, if she responds positively and comfortably when you do the same, and this pattern repeats without hesitation, you're no longer looking at isolated behavior. You're looking at alignment. And alignment is the foundation of attraction. But here's where many men go wrong. They focus only on what they can do instead of what is being returned. They try to lead, to escalate, to push the interaction forward without checking whether it's actually being matched. And when that happens, the balance breaks. Because attraction is not built by force, it's built by synchronization. If you're always the one initiating, always the one creating momentum, then you're not in a mutual dynamic. You're in a one-sided effort. And over time, that creates imbalance, which leads to confusion, frustration, or even rejection. But when you pay attention to mutuality, everything becomes clearer. You start asking different questions. Not what can I do next, but is this being matched? Not how do I move this forward, but is it naturally moving forward on its own? That shift in perspective grounds you, keeps you aligned with reality instead of pushing against it. And when something is real, it doesn't need to be forced. Now, this doesn't mean everything has to be perfectly equal at every moment. Human interaction isn't mechanical. There will be times when one person leads more, when the energy shifts slightly. But over time, the pattern should balance out. There should be moments where she leans in, where she initiates, where she invests. That's what you're looking for. Because mutuality is not about perfection. It's about consistency of shared effort. And when that shared effort is present, the interaction feels different. It feels lighter, more engaging, more alive. There's no pressure to prove anything, no need to constantly analyze. You're simply participating in something that's unfolding naturally between two people. That's where real connection begins to take shape. So as you move forward, don't just focus on what signals you're receiving. Pay attention to what's being returned. Notice the balance, the rhythm, the flow of energy between you. Because in the end, attraction is not about what one person allows. It's about what both people create together. And when that creation is mutual, you don't have to question it, you experience it. Now, as you begin to understand mutuality, how energy flows back and forth between two people, we arrive at something even more fundamental, something that sits underneath every signal we've talked about, and that is emotional state. Because physical boundaries are not fixed, they're fluid. And what determines how open or closed those boundaries are in any given moment is not logic, not rules, but how someone feels in your presence. Emotion drives behavior. When a woman feels relaxed, safe, and engaged, her body reflects that. Her posture opens up, her movements become more natural, her response is more fluid. The need to guard, to control, to create distance begins to fade. And as that happens, physical boundaries soften, not because she's decided something logically, but because her emotional state allows it. But the opposite is just as true. The moment she feels uncertain, pressured, or uncomfortable, those boundaries return instantly. The body closes, distance increases, responses become shorter, more controlled, less expressive. And this shift can happen quickly, sometimes in seconds because it's not a conscious decision. It's a protective response. That's why understanding emotional state is so critical. Because if you only focus on behavior, on what she allows or doesn't allow, you're missing the cause behind it. You're looking at the effect, not the source. And when you misunderstand the source, you misread the situation. For example, if she allows a certain level of touch in one moment, but becomes more reserved later, it doesn't necessarily mean she's changed her mind about you. It may simply mean her emotional state has shifted. Something in the environment changed. The dynamic changed. The feeling changed and behavior followed. This is where awareness separates itself from assumption. Most people take behavior personally. They interpret every change as a direct reflection of themselves. But when you understand emotional state, you realize that behavior is often a reflection of the moment, not a fixed judgment. And that realization keeps you grounded. It prevents overreaction. It prevents insecurity. It allows you to stay present instead of getting pulled into unnecessary interpretation. Now, let's go deeper. Emotional state is influenced by multiple factors. Your presence, yes, but also the environment, past experiences, mood, even external stress. So your role is not to control how someone feels. That's impossible. Your role is to create conditions that make positive emotional states more likely. And those conditions are built through everything we've discussed: authenticity, awareness, respect, timing. When you're calm, when you're present, when you're not forcing outcomes or creating pressure, you contribute to a sense of ease. You make it easier for someone to relax, to engage, to open up naturally. And when that happens, boundaries shift without effort. When you introduce pressure, when you rush, assume, or try to take more than what's being naturally given, you disrupt that emotional state. You create tension. And tension leads to distance. This is why patience is not just important, it's essential. Because emotional comfort takes time to build and it can be lost quickly if mishandled. You have to be aware of the moment, aware of the signals, aware of how your actions are influencing the dynamic, and that awareness keeps everything aligned. There's also a deeper truth here. When someone feels genuinely good around you, when your presence consistently creates a positive emotional experience, they naturally want to stay in that space. They want to be around you. They want to engage, not because you forced it, but because it feels right. And when something feels right, behavior follows. So as you move forward, shift your focus. Don't obsess over specific actions or signals in isolation. Pay attention to the emotional environment you're creating. Ask yourself, does this feel relaxed? Does it feel natural? Is there ease here? Because in the end, physical boundaries are not negotiated. They're revealed by emotion. And when you understand that, you stop trying to control behavior and start influencing experience. And the person who can shape experience without force is the one who creates real connection. Now, when you bring all of this together, comfort, context, progression, mutuality, emotional state, you arrive at the one principle that determines whether attraction grows or collapses. And that principle is respect. Because the moment you replace awareness with assumption, you break the dynamic. Respect is what keeps everything aligned. It's what allows attraction to breathe, to develop naturally, to evolve without pressure. But the second you interpret signals as entitlement, as something you now have or deserve, you shift the entire interaction. You move from connection into control. And control is where attraction begins to die. Let's be very clear about this. Just because someone has shown comfort, just because there has been progression, just because there is mutual engagement, it does not mean you have ownership over that person or the direction of the interaction. It simply means something positive is happening in that moment, and moments can change. Respect is the ability to recognize that truth and still remain grounded. It's understanding that every step forward in connection is given, not taken. It's maintaining awareness of boundaries even as they begin to open. And that awareness is what creates trust. Because trust is not built through intensity. It's built through consistency of behavior over time. When a woman feels that you respect her boundaries, even unspoken ones, she relaxes more. She becomes more open, more comfortable, more willing to engage. Why? Because there's no pressure. There's no fear that the moment she shows openness, it will be taken too far. That sense of safety is powerful, but the opposite is just as important to understand. The moment you assume too much, when you take a signal and push beyond it, when you try to accelerate things without alignment, you introduce tension, you make the interaction feel unpredictable. And unpredictability in this context does not create excitement, it creates caution. Because now, instead of feeling understood, she feels like she has to manage the situation. And the moment someone feels they have to manage you, attraction drops. This is why restraint is not weakness, it's intelligence. It's intelligence. It shows that you're in control of yourself, that you're aware of the dynamic, that you don't need to rush or force anything, and that kind of control is rare. Most people react, very few respond. When you respond instead of react, you create stability. And stability is what allows attraction to deepen into something more meaningful. Without it, everything stays surface level, fragile, easily disrupted. Now, there's also a deeper philosophical truth here. Respect is not just about the other person, it's about you. It reflects your standards, your mindset, your ability to operate with awareness rather than impulse. It shows whether you're driven by short-term gain or long-term connection. Because anyone can push a moment, but very few can build something that lasts. And building requires patience. It requires the ability to let things unfold at their natural pace, to trust the process rather than trying to control the outcome. That's where real confidence comes from. Not from forcing results, but from knowing you don't need to. When you operate from that place, your presence changes. You're calmer, more grounded, more intentional. And people feel that. They respond to it because it creates an environment where connection can grow without pressure. And that's the environment where attraction thrives. So as I'll move forward, remember this. Every signal you receive is not a green light to take more. It's information to understand more. It's a moment to observe, to align, to respond with awareness. Because the strongest connections are not built by pushing boundaries. They're built by respecting them. And when you respect the process, you don't just maintain attraction, you earn trust. And trust, in the end, is what turns moments into something real.